Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to cover something that used to intimidate me when I was a new photographer. So that is this dial right here on this camera. So I used to always shoot on auto mode and never wanted to venture to any of the other settings because I was scared that I wouldn't be able to get the picture I want. So today we're going to cover the other settings on this dial and how you can use them to get great photos. So let's get started. Okay, so here we go. So this is a Nikon D7100. So it's a modern DSLR and it has all the same settings as the Sony that I shoot on and just about every DSLR that's out there right now. So when you're looking for a camera, you're going to find these settings on all of them. So don't worry about not finding a camera that has these settings. So the settings we're talking about are right here on this dial. All right, so you have auto in green, P, S, A, and M. And we'll talk about each one of those and go over all the features and stuff for each one of those. The first one we're going to talk about is auto. So that's the green one here. It may look a little different on whatever camera you have, but in auto mode, it just takes everything in on the sensor, and then the camera chooses what information it wants to use to create, quote unquote, the best picture. So it's not always going to be the photo that you want, but it is a picture that the camera thinks is the best based on what it sees coming into the sensor. All right, so I was really intimidated when I first started using cameras, so I never wanted to go and venture past the auto mode. So I didn't want to use any of these letter modes because they scared me. But after doing just a little research, there's really nothing to be scared about, and you're going to get better images if you use them. All right, so the first one we'll talk about manual aperture mode, or exposure mode, sorry. So manual exposure mode allows you to shoot after you manually adjust the exposure and adjust the shutter or the aperture and the shutter speed. So I'm going to turn the camera on here and we'll turn on live view so that you guys can see the monitor here. Okay. And so the way that you change the settings on the manual mode, aperture mode, shutter mode, and programmed mode is by these dials here. So there's a dial here on the back that you can move back and forth. And there's also one right here on the front that you can move back and forth. Okay, so those change different settings depending on what you're doing with the camera, and we'll go over those. So in manual mode, you're changing the shutter speed and the aperture value, and then everything else the camera does. So down here in the bottom, you'll see that it shows the shutter speed here and the aperture here of f13. I'm gonna go ahead and take the lens cap off so that we can actually get some readings here. Okay, so in manual mode, when I move this rear dial here, you'll see that the shutter speed is changing. So you can keep changing it, and nothing happens here to the aperture mode. And then if I move the front dial, you'll see that the aperture mode is changing, and we'll cover the full range of whatever your lens can cover. Now keep in mind that lenses are different. So some lenses may cover aperture of f2.8 all the way to f22, but some may be very limited in what they can cover and may only cover f5.6 to f22. So just keep in mind that when you buy a lens, each lens is different and each lens is going to have a different aperture range. All right, so that's manual mode in a nutshell. All right, so the next mode we're going to use is aperture priority mode. So this shoots by adjusting just the aperture. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust the aperture here, and you'll see it changes. But you'll notice that I'm just moving the front dial here. I'm not moving the rear dial or anything. And as I change the aperture, the shutter speed changes for me. So based on what the camera is reading and what setting I'm changing on the aperture, the shutter speed changes accordingly. All right, next mode is shutter priority mode. So as you may guess, shutter priority mode is just the opposite of aperture priority mode, where as I change the shutter speed, get down a little further here, you'll see that now the aperture is changing as I change the shutter speed. So this is all going to be different and dependent on your lighting conditions and where you're at. So just keep in mind that the settings you see here are probably not very accurate. One, because I'm using a black background and I've got this huge light for my studio on. So the settings are going to change depending on where you're at and what location you're in. All right, and the last mode that's on here is called programmed auto mode. So shutter speed, you'll notice I'm trying to change the dials here. Shutter speed and your aperture are automatic, but you can change everything else, such as your white balance, exposure compensation. You can change your ISO. You can change your shutter to be like some of the cameras nowadays have where it detects a smile. So when somebody smiles, it takes a picture. So you can use that kind of feature. So you can adjust everything except for the shutter speed and aperture. So my favorite mode to use is manual mode. I feel that it gives me the best options to create the image that I see with my eyes and the most freedom to create what I want. There's very little limitations in manual mode. I just feel like I get a better image. So practice with each mode so that you can get used to your camera. Practicing will help you see what each specific setting does with the camera and does to your images. So take an image and then adjust the settings, and then take another one. Compare the two or more images to learn from them. All right, what'd you think? Did you learn something today? Do you want to venture off of auto and start using manual, aperture, shutter, and programmed auto mode? Go ahead and get out there, get your camera, and go take some amazing photos using any other setting except for auto. Get onto manual mode, adjust your shutter and aperture, and get great photos. That's it for this time. If you like the video, make sure you hit like, make sure you hit subscribe, and make sure you subscribe for alerts so that you can get other videos like this delivered directly to your notifications. That's it for today, and we'll see you in the next video.